Mimic is the most anticipated monster to come to My Singing Monsters, but today we're going to be delving into how Mimic could arrive in the first place. If we head on back to December, we actually got a hint towards Mimic's eventual return, so let's go and take a listen over there.
The next new monster in Dawn of Fire will actually be quite an old monster, one that will be familiar to some.
So as you guys heard, Mimic is going to be the next monster coming to Dawn of Fire, and recently too, if we go back to what we've had for Dawn of Fire, we had Pong Ping arriving in both Dawn of Fire and My Singing Monsters, and then also we've got the Fire Quints that are arriving in My Singing Monsters first. And we know My Singing Monsters is way more popular than Dawn of Fire, and at this point it pretty much has everything that Dawn of Fire has, so there is no doubt inside of my mind that we're going to be seeing Mimic coming to My Singing Monsters very soon. With it coming to Dawn of Fire, they are absolutely going to be planning to add it alongside the main game. So how is Mimic going to arrive in My Singing Monsters? Well, aside from his weird Colossal Island theory that we put out there a few months back, I do want to represent today where Mimic could actually go, as there's lots of thoughts in the air, especially with Mimic being our air element representative, Quint Elemental. So let's take a look at the different options that we have. So first up, we have Amber Island. This is the one where everyone's always like, oh, every single Dawn of Fire monster is on Amber Island, so it just makes sense to add Mimic to Amber Island. But that island is exclusive to the fire elementals, and it wouldn't belong there, Mimic, seeing as though it doesn't have the fire element. And honestly, having that just randomly there does not make any sense at all. And also, it's Amber Island, guys. Just please no. No. That's all I have to say to that one. It's Amber Island, please no. No. We can leave that behind now for that. Then we have Tribal Island, which is all natural monsters. So I do get this case, and honestly, it is the final monster that would need to be added for Tribal Island to be complete in the first place. And we could finally get something over there since it's not been updated since 2015, that island. Yeah, everyone always talks about Sugar Bush, but Tribal Island also, guys, has not been updated in forever. But seeing as though Tribal Island mechanics are also a bit iffy and it's unlikely to be updated again, seeing as though it's not that popular, I honestly don't think we're going to be seeing anything there. So that brings us on to his final one that everyone is always talking about, which is Mimic Island. Now, not Colossal Island, do keep in mind this time, but Mimic Island. There's been lots of rumors afloat. We had DP Singh's comment, who was one of the creators, who went with the monster handlers and proclaims that apparently there's been natural monster recordings that have been going on that likely would indicate towards a natural island being in development. However, we do know that all 30 monsters would need to return for this, and sure, we've been having loads of new voice actors recently, but all 30 original monsters having new voice actors, I don't know whether would settle quite as well. Although in saying that, they did do a really good job with your Ostrich, so the gate is definitely open, but I do sense it might be a bit of a struggle, and too much of a struggle potentially for them to actually do it. Even though I do think it would be a really cool idea, an entire island dedicated to 30 monsters, 31 including Mimic, and Mimic being the only new monster on there just doesn't seem like it would be in their best interest right now. It's not the most exciting option to me, and therefore I do feel like all of these options have flimsy elements towards them. So we're going to attempt to rectify that a little bit today. Now, back with his Colossals, the main reason why I was saying Mimic and Colossal Island could combine is this exact reason right here. If we are to truly get a natural island, I just don't think it's going to warrant that kind of hype level for it to be released on the kind of schedule that we're seeing. I mean, I love my updates and I love getting them weekly, but imagining a Mimic Island releasing weekly with these new monsters, I don't think it would be quite as exciting as checking out all of these fire monsters that we've been seeing. This island seems like more of a one-off thing, natural island, and if it was to ever happen, I do think it would have to be released all at once, and I don't think that's My Singing Monsters' jam, and it's certainly not my jam. So to me, I think the most interesting way to add Mimic would be to actually add it somewhere that isn't just specifically made for Mimic. But if not Tribal and Amber Island, then where are you thinking then, MPG? Well, I am actually thinking to add Mimic especially where it is supposed to belong in the first place. And for that, guys, we've got to go back to the islands it was supposed to be on Mimic's original purpose. So Mimic was designed to be a monster that would replicate what you were seeing back to it, and Mimic did later become what is now known as the recording studio. Particularly for Mimic though, Mimic had an association to all of the original natural islands, and in fact it was designed to be a monster that you could obtain all across plant, cold, air, water and earth island. And I think therefore it would be so cool to see a Quint outside of Amber Island. If we were to add Mimic all across the natural islands, I think it would be such a cool moment for the game. You know, Quints are just the coolest monsters inside of My Singing Monsters, so finally having that outside of Amber Island will be just such a thrilling experience. Just that overall. So having it anywhere outside of it would be absolutely amazing. This could be their only chance to add an actual Quint outside of Amber Island itself. I mean, Mimic is the exception here. It contains all of the natural elements, it's no resemblance to the fire element, and overall, Quints, just imagining them being on the original islands, it just feels so fresh, new, and just cool. Mimic has been the most anticipated monster ever in terms of the concept art side of things, and just in general, really. The hype behind Mimic is unsurmountable, and I honestly do feel like this monster could carry itself across the islands. And I mean, if we're going back to the craziness factor of it, you might think this might be an overzealous move and might be too fresh and crazy, but let me tell you guys and point you towards those rares and epics and just Mythical Island overall. We've been seeing all of these new rare and epic classes coming along, and they've been throwing them out of nowhere, being crazy with the ones that they've been throwing out, absolutely unexpected, and these mythicals are so unexpected, so why not just have a random Quint on the natural islands, I say? Let there be an element that doesn't even exist on the original natural islands. Yeah, sure, it's going to be so hard to breed, I imagine, but that's going to be so fun too at the same time. Having a Quint outside of Dawn of Fire be breedable in the first place. It could even just be on Air Island. I mean, there's no logistics here saying this has to be all of the original islands too. It's the Air Quint, so they could easily do that as well. I think that option would also be a lot better over as Tribal and Amber Island contenders, and just having an island dedicated to Mimic. I mean, we love all of these islands though, the original islands, Plant, Cold, Air, Water, Earth Island. We love them all, and I do want to continue to see them expand beyond Mythicals and Colossals. At the moment, I don't see them attempting to make updates beyond that. It sort of feels like these islands, they don't have any plans beyond that right now, so I would love to see Mimic become a part of this plan. We love these islands, we want to continue to see them grow, and I think Mimic could be his perfect way into that. I mean, looking at Mimic right now is a three-legged parrot with hands for feet. So we gotta think now how on earth this monster is gonna contribute towards these islands or whatever is gonna go on, because this monster is not to be taken seriously, clearly. So we have a goofy presenter personality, I would say, with this monster. First glance, you're seeing goofy, craziness overboard with this, and it's just overall possibly being the funniest monster yet. A bit like, I'm seeing this being a very off-the-ball monster with lively animations that carries it and makes it feel ecstatic, fresh, and new, whilst also having a really epic sound, I do feel like, and just overall having a feeling of epicness too. It is a Quint, so I do feel like that needs to be preserved, even though it's probably going to have this goofy personality, and overall, seeing as though Mimic has been the most anticipated Quint as of yet, I think honestly this monster should potentially feel the most epic out of all of the Quints overall. I mean, the natural monsters to me all signify the beginning of the franchise overall, so Mimic coming and finally filling in a gap inside of the franchise that has been there since the beginning is a really big deal, and I think that should be carried across its design, its sound, and overall just going back to the theory side of things. Everyone's always like, oh, Mimic is a parrot, it's gonna mimic monsters on the island, like its name literally says, and as it was supposed to, as it was literally meant to mimic back to you. I don't sense that being the right way to go, because you see guys, Mimic, it's in the name. Mimic can mimic anything, and this is where everything changes, guys, because Mimic could be anything across the islands itself. And going on to that, we're on about these multiple islands right now. Seeing as though Mimic is a parrot and we're saying it can mimic anything, then what if its sound was different across these islands? We love Epic Wubbox for the fact that Epic Wubbox is different across all of them, all these unique sounds, designs. I love that, and you know what? I want to see that continue, and if anyone was to do it, I think one of the most anticipated things inside of the franchise could deliver on that. I mean, it can imitate anything. It can sing differently on everyone, and I think this presents a very unique chance for the monster handlers to get very experimental. Doesn't necessarily have to even embark specifically a vocalist sound. The options behind its vocals are potentially limitless across the islands, and I think that could tie into what could make this monster very exciting in the first place. I mean, we got these expressive vocals that are probably going to come from it, with it having this goofy presenter personality, but to mix that up, having a different sound across them, I think would be awesome. But you know what? Going that step further, I like Epic Box for the fact it also has a different design. So, you know, seeing as though Mimic is quite a special monster, I think if it is to come to different islands too, I think portraying that therefore, like Epic Box, where it might have different hair or different kind of textures amongst the islands to differ itself and make it look different whilst also having these different sounds could be a really unique thing for Mimic. I mean, this is the most anticipated concept monster yet, so to me, I just think let's give it attention and give it a big overhaul like Flute Fly, sure, representing its former self still, as I do feel like that's a very important aspect behind the design, still representing that in a way, but I feel like they can make adjustments here and there. We've seen it with Flute Fly where they can still make those adjustments, still making it look similar towards its concept art still. And even Epic Box itself, they are able to manipulate the design so that they can make itself very unique, but also represent themselves in a very similar likelihood towards the other islands that they might appear on. So I just think, why not go ahead and do that? With Mimic's design in particular, though, ignoring the design differences that we could see across the different islands if it did come there, I do think Mimic will have to have quite a big change. Now, Flute Fly was a huge change for sure, but I'm looking at Mimic right now and it feels like it's got to have quite a big change here. I know Flute Fly did for sure, but I feel like this is probably going to be an even bigger change, guys, because I'm seeing with this one, yes, the hair is basically the hallmark behind this monster, so that's probably going to stay, but for the rest of the body, I'm seeing really large changes having to be made here to replicate the My Singing Monsters style and just overall make it monster-worthy in a sense, seeing as though the monsters are a lot more stylized in the My Singing Monster style, shall we say. Mimic doesn't quite match up to that just yet, so I do sense a large design change having to come here, but overall, I think the concept behind Mimic could be just so exciting, and actually, I don't think we're going to be waiting all too long for Mimic, at least compared to what we have been waiting so far, as if we go on back to Pong Ping, I think Pong Ping might actually help us in knowing when Mimic might come along. So Pong Ping was teased in December, and Pong Ping arrived in June the following from December. So seeing as though Mimic was also teased in December, it's very likely that Mimic could also come around in June. So I'm expecting Mimic to come around June time. Now it's important to bear in mind that back in time we do have a bit of a reference point towards the Mimic development cycle, as back in June 2022 it was stated inside of the board game live stream that the sound and design were not made at all. So going from that and how Pong Ping's sound was made at that point inside of October, I do think we're facing a similar development cycle here. However, it is hard to interpret for Dawn of Fire, seeing as though it's often all over the place, but given its return inside of My Singing Monsters and them likely no doubt wanting to drop them inside of both games at the same time after Amber Island, it's very likely that we will be seeing it June time. It could be our most hyped Quint monster, so bearing that in mind, I think there's a lot to be excited about with Mimic, but definitely let me know your opinions down below and make sure to snap that like button too, guys. I'll see you later though. For now, I'll Mimic along later. Whoa, whoa, whoa. I was thinking about what Mimic could sound like for the outro, so I could try and squawk a little bit, but I don't really know, to be honest. It'll be fun to see whatever Mimic sounds like, but please, if it comes on the natural islands, I would scream. Please make it happen.